Hey friends, it's Gloria and welcome back to another video. I have a pretty brief August wrap up to talk about today, so I'll also talk about some books that are on the horizon at the end of the video, but I read some new releases that I'm excited to talk about, so let's start with those. I picked up historical fiction author Kate Quinn's newest book, The Briar Club. So I have read 3 of Kate Quinn's previous books, this being my 4th, and I would say this is my 2nd favorite. Diamond Eye is my favorite, but it's still a 4-star read, and then this one, and then Rose Code, and then Alice Network. I own The Huntress, so I do want to try that one. And she has some older books that are more about like ancient Rome and ancient Egypt, I believe, which I haven't dived into, and I'm not sure how those hold up. I haven't seen too many people talk about them. But Kate Quinn is an author for me that I don't know where I sit yet. I have thoroughly enjoyed one of her books, and these ones that I usually give 3 stars, which are most of her books, I've liked. Like 3 stars is a positive book for me, but it doesn't have that like excellence quality for me to like fall in love with it, easily recommend it, but I do know that she is beloved by so many. This newest one I think is the most different from her previous books. Her previous books focused on a singular female character for the most part and all had to do with the war. This one is quite different. It's set in Washington DC in the 1950s during the McCarthy era, which I wasn't familiar with. That's kind of the start of the Cold War. People are terrified of communism. Maybe US and Russia are on the brink of war again. People are fearing that, especially after the Second War. So people have this like fear in them, and this follows a big host of different people. I believe 7 total main characters as well as other side characters. Like each women's storyline in here has other side characters too. So it follows all of these 7 different women living in a boarding house. They start off not really knowing each other, and then over time, for several years, they all become friends. So it's really this like found family friendship novel between all these women and their lives and how they intersect. And I thought the pacing was super interesting. There is a mystery element that kicks off the book. Someone died, and you get the voice of the house being like, someone died in my walls, and you're curious about who it's going to be. Which of these characters are dead? And so that mystery and tension is pulling you through the story. I think that was done excellently. The thing that brought this book down for me maybe to like a 3.5 was the individual storylines. There were definitely ones that I cared about more than others, and I think with multiple perspective novels you're always going to run into that. You are going to fall in love with a certain character and then be disappointed when that perspective shifts to another character that you care less about. And so that happened to me quite a few times. Like out of 7 main characters, I liked 3 of them, you know, and I didn't care about 4 of the other ones. And I'm like, okay, I want to go back and I want to find out more about the other people. And you don't really get to go back. You just move forward in time through these characters and you get to know their backstory and their little mysteries and things that are happening in their lives, and again, how they all connect. Really, this is a story of feminism, women empowerment, friendship. You get to know about what it was like to be a woman during the 1950s from all different walks of life. I think this was quite well done, and I think this will be a big win for many people. I'm glad I read it. It was a positive read overall. Just, you know, some things that didn't fully work for me, but I think is gonna totally work for a lot of people. Okay, next, a new release that totally worked for me, hit all of the marks, is Here One Moment by Liane Moriarty. I read the e-arc on my Kindle in the evening, and I think I finished this book in 2 days because I could not put it down. I think if you're a Liane Moriarty fan, you love contemporary novels, you will eat this one up like I did. This book now solidifies Liane Moriarty as a favorite author. I knew I loved her books in the past. I've absolutely loved Big Little Lies and What Alice Forgot, and those were both 5 stars, and this one is another 5 stars, so 3 5-star reads. I've read some other Liane Moriarty's that are more like 3-star books, and I know that some of her more recent releases didn't like wow a lot of people. Apples Never Fall I've heard mediocre things about, and 9 Perfect Strangers, Truly Madly Guilty, those are all kind of average reads I think for a lot of people. I still have them on my shelf actually right here of books to read. I want to read Her to Zero, but her newest book, this one is best if you don't know anything. I went in knowing absolutely nothing except that this cover was absolutely ugly. Her covers are garbage, I will say that. Whoever is designing her covers, publishing company needs to pick a new cover design artist. But besides that, I knew nothing, and that was perfect going into this book. This book has like a wonderful mystery element and pacing in it as well that keeps you going through the story. It's why I flew through it. I could not put it down. Super short chapters, which was another win for me. Also has multiple perspectives, but this book, it worked for me because I liked all the perspectives. But really, I don't think there was a single perspective that I disliked reading. I cared about all of them, and I think that is what differentiates Liane Moriarty's books, because you find yourself caring for these characters, at least the books that I've read, and relating to them on such a real level and what they're thinking about. I think she does such an incredible job laying out the inner thought life very realistically for different people from all different walks of life, whatever they're experiencing in her novels, which is usually some sort of like trauma or grief or some big thing that they're working through. And also this book heavily deals with grief and death, and I don't love reading about those topics. Like those are anti-buzzword books for me. If a book is sold as a book that's dealing with grief, I'm usually like, I don't even like it. I have had very unpopular opinions about very popular beloved books that deal with grief. Like A Man Called Ove, for example. Didn't love that book. Everyone else loves it. I thought it was mediocre. And so know that going in, but I think if you love those topics, you're even gonna love this book even more because it covers a lot of that. It has to do with like fate and what happens on a plane flight after you learn some information. Really the main premise of this book is, what would you do if you found out that you were gonna die on a certain day from a certain thing and you knew when and how you were gonna die? I think that is what really intrigued a lot of people to read The Measure by Nikki Erlich, which I read earlier this year, and I didn't love it. This one unpacks that, I thought, so much more brilliantly. So I think if you love The Measure, you'll love this one maybe even more, because I did. I don't know, saying a lot, but it unpacks that premise of like, what would you do with this information? And I think it's done so well. I think the only other thing to note is that it does have like a little bit of a fortune teller, like psychic vibes, which I know a lot of people avoid to read about, but that's not really the point of the book. And it's not truly like magical in any kind of way or speculative. It's just a part of the story and a part of the main character voice that we hear in her past, but it's interesting. I love this one, totally ate it up. I think this is a fantastic book for getting you out of a reading slump. I think this is fantastic for like a fast-paced, punchy book that's just like really fun and interesting. I'm gonna rave about it and I'm gonna make people read it because I'm gonna recommend it a lot. So there's that. I'm so excited to have found a book that I loved. Next, let me touch on a book that I didn't love. I decided to keep the Rosamund Pilcher train going. If you don't know, I read Winter Solstice this year and The Shell Seekers, and then a few of her other books. I think this is maybe number 4 or 5, and it's a very short read. This is perfect for summer reading, but unfortunately, I did not like this one, similarly to the book I read last month by her that I didn't like, because this has to do with a very weird, unconventional, now some would say would not be okay or appropriate relationship. We mainly follow this like rich, uppity girl from the UK that goes to try to find her father and goes to an island in Spain and falls in love with a man who's like 20 years older than her that she thought was her father but is not. And they develop a relationship over the course of like 2 days, and it was really cringy and gross, and I hated all of it. So I gave this book like 1.5 stars. I thought it was terrible. Again, Rosamund Pilcher, amazing scenery. Like you get a wonderful sense of place of the Spanish island. I totally felt the atmosphere of that. But the characters and the relationship and the everything else, disgusting. Icky, gross, absolutely not. I'm still gonna continue reading her. Like I have one of the books that I wanna read in September called September by her. I would love to read more of her books because she has this grip on me about her sense of place, which is so wonderful to read, and they're cozy and atmospheric books. But on my journey of reading through all of her books, I'm gonna discover some duds, and so far 2 duds in a row by her. I hope that a few of her other books will be redeemable in that way. And then lastly, I'm not going to dwell too much on these, but I'm continuing on in the Maisie Dobbs series. I read Elegy for Eddie, book 9, and Leaving Everything Most Loved, book 10, and I'm still really much enjoying it. These 10 books conclude Maisie Dobbs in London solving mysteries. These 10 books followed about 4+ years of her life and her solving various mysteries and really kind of dealing with the ramifications and the aftermath of World War I and how it touched many different people in many different lives. I'm not completely drawn to the mysteries per se. I'm more in it for the character development of Maisie and some of the side characters that we now know and love. This 10th book ends with her closing down her business and doing some traveling, and I'm very curious where the next 8 books in the series are going to go because the series is now complete. I'm assuming, based on some of the titles that are coming up and where the timeline is going, the Second World War is going to begin and she will be pulled back into some sort of military service or maybe spying or something along those lines because of her skill set and of her experience. So I think that's where the story is headed, and I'm excited for that. I'm excited to see her grow, and there are like little seeds of romance that have been planted, and it's so slow burn and it's like almost barely there, but I so want something to happen soon between her and something somewhat, but I'm still totally rooting for her and I'm loving it. And then because that was so short and sweet and brief, I hope, I want to touch on some books that are on my horizon. I don't usually do this in videos, but I haven't done a TBR video in maybe this whole year. I mean, with having like a new baby, and I just really am solely mood reading. I have done like barely anybody reads. I think I've done a couple, and I've just done all mood reading with some direction based on some readathons that I have my eye on. But besides that, I haven't done a TBR and I do kind of miss it. So I decided to lump a loose TBR into this video. So because we were just talking about Maisie Dobbs, I have the next 3 books. These are checked out from the library. I am listening to them on audio, which is amazing, preferred way to go. But I have 11, 12, and 13, and they all kind of have to do with the wars. I don't know if I'll read all 3 or listen to all 3 in September. Maybe I'll listen to 1 or 2, but I do plan to continue on in that series. I think like 2 or 3 a month is solid until I finish all 8 before the year's up. Then I'm picking up for Buzzword The Sound of a Wild Snail Eating. This book has been on my TBR for a while and I am just barely into it. And spoiler, I'm already fully loving this. This is quiet and still and peaceful and just reminded me a lot of actually Penguin the Magpie, which is a nonfiction book that I absolutely loved with similar themes. This has to do with a woman experiencing illness and just completely debilitating conditions in her body. She's kind of being saved and accompanied by this snail that's in a flower pot next to her bed. She's just noticing the snail and also just how different her life has become. So really enjoying that one, and this one squeezes in at 170 pages, so it also works for Shorty September, which is a readathon here in the booktube space where people read short books. So this is short and sweet, and I do want to read more nonfiction, so that one is going well. Speaking of nonfiction, and it's quite short actually, also under 200 pages, is Parenting 14 Gospel Principles That Can Radically Change Your Family by Paul David Tripp. This is a Christian nonfiction parenting book that we were recommended, and my husband and I started reading it and we are already completely convicted. So it's a great one and would highly recommend, even though we're only like 1 or 2 chapters in. So that one will be read in the next month or so. I mentioned September by Rosamund Pilcher. A bit of a chunky monkey, but not a terribly long audiobook. I have no idea what this one's about, but I'm now noticing very similar obvious kind of themes in Pilcher's books that are repeated throughout her novels, which are one of the reasons I think why so many people love her. There's just something familiar and cozy about her books. Usually has to do with an older protagonist, an older character, and their life and some sort of grief or trauma that happened and them dealing with that. And there's always like an aspect of found family or like interesting relationships. Not always my favorite, but I just think she writes so well, so I'm kind of hooked to try all of her books. So this one, I thought I have to read in September since it's titled September and it's giving off very fall vibes. So I'm gonna try it. We'll see how it goes. These next 2, total on a whim. I don't know if I'm gonna like them, but I have Ink by Alice Broadway. This is a young adult novel that I first put on my want to read list like 4 or 5 years ago. When I started watching Haley in Bookland, when, you know, all the rave was kind of YA novels at the time, which I've now stepped away from for the most part. And this book has really bad ratings and it's a trilogy, and I have seen no one talk about it or give it good reviews, but I think it is one of the most beautiful covers. It has gold copper foiling. This is I think like a dystopian world where people's bodies have tattoos of what they've done or like the things in their life that they've accomplished, so that could be positive or negative. And it's about a young girl that notices a tattoo, I think on her dad, that maybe means that he killed someone. And so it's sort of uncovering that, like, what is the truth? I have no idea how this is gonna go. This might be absolutely terrible, but I really want to try it. It feels fall and it feels like I want to try a YA and see how it goes. So this might be really bad, and let me know if you've read it or tried it and what you think, but I hopefully will read it and come back to you and let you know what I think. And then absolutely on a whim, I picked up Soldier Sailor by Claire Kilroy. Just saw very briefly someone gave us 5 stars on Instagram, just like posted an Instagram story about it. They read more literary novels, but I just saw this on my new shelf at the library and I decided to pick it up. And this has to do with motherhood. And now being a mom, I'm like more intrigued to read on that topic. And I think this specifically deals with like someone having a really hard time being a mom and the identity shift and the tumultuous emotions that you experience and the boundless love and relentless battle, and basically a mom and her son, which is kind of what I'm going through, although I have an almost 1-year-old, so I don't have like an older child, but I'm so curious to see how this author portrays those feelings and emotions. Again, I'll let you know how it goes. This is the UK Novel of the Year, and it was longlisted for the Women's Prize for Fiction. Whoops. I might not like that because I don't read prize books. I don't follow prizes, so maybe you have heard about this and liked it. I'm curious to try it. I might hate it. It might be way too literary for me. We'll see. So that's kind of where my headspace is at. I also have a wonderful list of books that you guys all recommended from my previous video about where I reorganized my shelves, and I asked for recommendations from all the books that I own on my Goodreads, and you guys have come through with some excellent recommendations and some books that I will now be prioritizing. I moved a stack over to my cart. I have a little book cart, and so I will be thinking about those books. I don't know if any of them will be picked up in September, but hopefully in the next few months, as the year is winding down, I will be picking some of those up because they all sound great, and I love your guys' personalized like recommendations and why you think I'll like them. And just a lot of the books are books that have been on my shelf for way too long. I've heard so many positive things. They come very highly rated. They have wonderful reviews on Goodreads. And so it's just like, Gloria, get your stuff together and read them, because I think they'll be great. So fingers crossed, I'll sprinkle some of those throughout my reading as well. And yeah, this is, I guess, more of a September TBR, but maybe September, October, near future. Pile of possibilities, if you will. Thank you all so much for watching. Let me know what you think of any of these books, if any of them sound good to you, if you've read any of them. Always love hearing your guys' thoughts and comments down below. And I'll see you guys in another video soon. Bye.